Now you have all the problems available to you. Do you solve all the problems? No. You have to prioritize. As I've been telling you again and again, a good problem is one which gives you a high leverage when you solve it. And it's very critical to reduce your entire bouquet of problems to the most significant problems. So there are two methods which are very handy when it comes to prioritization of problem. The first is called the Pareto law. What's a Pareto law? Pareto law, also known as the 80-20 rule, means that 80% causes will have 20% effect and 20% causes will have 80% effect. So suppose I have 10 problems. I don't have to solve all the 10 problems because not each problem has the same impact. So maybe I can solve the first 4 problems and have 75 to 80% goodness. Now to reduce the 10 problems into the 4 problems is tricky. So you can do it in multiple ways. You can do it mathematically by trying to understand that what is the weightage of each problem, and then you can skim the cream in terms of picking up the most significant problem. Or you can do it in terms of intuition also. You can have an inkling that, all right, so these are the 2 problems if I solve, or maybe the 3 problems which I solve, which will have the maximum impact, and I'll only go after these 3 or 2 problems. For example, if I go to the voter turnout, I can have a substantially high jump if I make it easy to get myself enrolled into the voter list, especially for the people who are immigrant, people who are staying in some other cities. If I can give any local proof and I can get enrolled into that constituency, I think this can really encourage people to go out and vote. Another important thing in this aspect could be the role of NGOs and help groups and volunteer organizations. If as the election approaches, if they can create more awareness, if they can help people, especially the first timers, to understand what is it to vote, how much in advance that they have to be, what's a location where they have to vote, and we can use technology to understand what is a rush, what time you should leave home. I think this can be another big breakthrough. Of course, people have been also talking about online voting, which has its own set of limitations, but I think in future, who knows, it's also possible. As a country, we were the first ones in the world to use electronic voting machine, which has been phenomenally successful. Many countries still use a physical ballot, but we are very advanced in that regard. So maybe someday we might be using online voting, and this can be a game changer. You see, so not every problem is worth the while. So that is your Pareto law. Another very useful technique that comes from the house of Mackenzie is called as ME-C. What is ME-C? ME-C stands for mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. Now suppose in a class, I have girls and boys. And if I divide my class into number of girls and number of boys, is that a mutually exclusive classification? Yes, because they are 2 separate sets, boys and girls. And is it collectively exhaustive? Yes, again, because if I add the number of girls and number of boys, I get my total class strength. So the way you have to look at it is that when you are reducing the problem down, it's a good idea from 10 or 20 problems to reduce it to just about 5 problems. And the way you carve these problems out has to be mutually exclusive. Why mutually exclusive? Primarily because if there is a lot of overlap, then what you have done is that you have not done an efficient job. And also you have to reduce the interdependency between problems, so that if different teams have to solve the problems, they can solve it without having any cascading or a domino effect. So with the Pareto law and the ME-C technique, which I have been using very extensively, you can bring down the problem into the most important pieces. And also what's also critical is perhaps if you go back to your model of impact versus frequency. You see, if a problem happens at a very high frequency and at a very high impact, should you pick it up? Yes, correct? So the impact frequency matrix is another technique which we discussed previously that you can use possibly here to understand the gravity of the problem that you should be picking up. So in this module, what we learned is, why do we need to understand the problem? How do we go to the root of the problem? 6 or 7 methods which are available to us to really understand the problem. And finally, how do we pick the problems which are worth going after? I sincerely hope that you liked the process and that you have developed the right tool sets, skill sets, and more importantly, the mindset to be an expert problem solver. In the next module, we'll talk about how do you solve the problems and generate high quality ideas. Thank you so much.